Hello?
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 Hi.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi? Hello?
Hey.
Hey, hello?
Hey. Hi.
Hello?
Hey guys, welcome to Mid Power Mondays. My name is Shane,
And this is Joe.
and today we're going to be talking about one of my mid power commander decks.
This is the worst mid-power commander deck ever experienced.
Aw,
Period.
what? Come on. Aw, man, it's not that bad, Joe.
I mean, it makes me hate life.
Okay, well then, alright. It does its job then, right? That's what commander's supposed to be about. Not fun, right? It's supposed to be tearing your opponent down, dude, right?
Exactly.
That's why we
And
play CDH.
exactly. And that's why if you never want to play Magic again, you should absolutely play this deck.
Oh, okay. So, over the last couple months, I've been trying to just build some low level trash, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Because, I like to play trash.
I too like to play trash and with trash.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're doing here. When we say trash though, it's not like accurate to what the deck actually is because the decks aren't trash.
Uh,
It's not like unplayable jank. That's like in my brain when I say trash, that's what I mean.
I feel like you're talking about my decks, which are pretty good, whereas your decks are trash.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think everyone should really understand that before
Okay,
we go
well,
into it.
well, that's a fair point. This deck in particular is a little bit on the trash side, but it's a theme deck and it's fun to play for
It's
me.
very focused trash.
So I'd say it's like a little bit stronger than a precon and has enough interaction in it to make it not a battle cruiser deck.
I would agree with you in that it's not battle cruiser. It's a way to get people to not like you.
Yes,
I don't know what we would call that deck, but that's what it is.
you call it trash.
Yeah,
So today we're going to be talking about our first deck tech, Yasova Dragonclaw. Alright, so this build started out as a flavor build where I wanted to build a deck themed around one of my favorite game franchises, Monster Hunter. Joe, you've played Monster Hunter, right?
once I've played one time.
You played one time Monster Hunter? We played more than once, Joe.
I've played one time for 60 hours.
Alright, so after some searching, a lot of searching, to find something that would line up with the theme of the franchise, I came across Yasova Dragonclaw.
Potentially the most devastating commander to friendships.
Joe's not wrong, but her name alone was almost enough to make me pick her as the commander. I mean, her clan fights dragons. She's Yasova Dragonclaw. You fight dragons in Monster Hunter. It's almost a no-brainer, but her ability also caught my eye.
Yes, the famous ability to make other people hate you.
Yasova has an ability that at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can pay one generic and either blue or red, two of those. If you do, you gain control of target creature an opponent controls with power less than Yasova. Until end of turn, you can untap that creature and it gains haste until end of turn. Essentially, capturing the creature, just like in Monster Hunter.
This is a wild, wild stretch, but okay.
Now, Joe, you know a big part of Monster Hunter is capturing monsters. I mean, half the quests are capture quests. So clearly there's some correlation here between Monster Hunter and Yasova. You can't deny that.
Again, Stretch Armstrong, but it fits.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, so the main theme of the deck ended up being around theft, which can or probably will get you hated out of the table. So we're doing my least favorite to play against deck first, because to get it, I mean, pretty much it's just to get it out of the way, right, Joe?
Yeah, if we never talk about this deck again and I never play it against it again, I'd be okay with that. As a matter of fact, if you had never brewed it in the first place, I'd feel like I was in a much better place emotionally.
Well, I don't know if I would be. I mean, I went through all the trouble to get a fancy alternate art card made and everything else for this deck, so it's like, I kind of need it. It's a rock in my life, Joe. I need this deck.
Your standards are immensely low. So, Shane, what the F are we trying to do in here?
Well, Joe, this deck is all about the theft of our opponent's creatures. This will allow us to gain extra value through sack outlets, deal extra damage to our opponents by swinging their own creatures at them, and generally just clearing the board of threats.
Continue.
There's a bunch of redundancy built in to allow us to take control of opponent's creatures even without Yasova on the board, as well as some synergies that will allow us to keep the creatures longer than a single turn.
Yes, this is the line you cross when you go from, oh, neat synergy, great strategy, Shane, to asshole.
Uh, well, I can't argue with that, but just want to say that there's enough stuff in here that the deck should keep going as long as all three opponents are not singling us out. So you should probably make some deals occasionally with people. Say, hey, yo, I won't blow your thing up if I steal it. Just let me hit this guy with it. Some of our theft effects will even allow us to take control of more than just creatures. Some target other permanents as well, such as Dominus of Fealty and Agent of Treachery. Sacrifice outlets like Perilous Forays, Primal Growth, and Life's Legacy will guarantee some value in the form of ramp or card advantage when we sacrifice a creature. Feed the Pack and Synod of the Sanctum can help us refill our own boards with creatures as well. As for ways to keep creatures that don't belong to us, we have a few effects that allow us to do that. Bizarre Trader is a bizarre card.
This is where I audibly let out a groan.
Tapping him allows you to give target player control of an artifact, creature, or land you control. Well, we can be the target player, and we can give ourselves stuff. Now, this effect overrides the until end of turn clause from our other theft abilities, giving us control of that creature permanently. We can also make use of blink effects to bring these creatures back under our control as well. Thassa's Deep Dwelling and Nephalia's Smuggler, good examples of this. Piles. Big piles. Piles. In this section, we're going to talk about piles, aka piles of cards, also known as classifications of cards, also known as grouping of cards, also known as what, Joe?
Bunch of stuff. Does the same general thing.
Joe, what's the best part about playing Magic?
I don't know. It's probably winning the game and not having your stuff stolen.
No. But I mean, what specifically about Magic? What step of Magic is the best part?
Oh, the end step, because then you're done and you can go out and get on your phone then.
No. Okay, well, for one, with the big discouraging cry for me for no phones at the table, unless you've got some kind of like important thing going on. If you're playing Magic, play Magic.
But how else am I going to ignore everything that you do and then ask you questions about it later?
Well, you can watch me draw these cards with these card advantage cards.
I don't like that. Let me play with my phone.
No, I'm just going to draw cards here with a pretty cool card called Shaman of the Great Hunt. So, he's pretty cool. Three generic and a red for a 4/2 Orc Shaman with haste. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Works pretty good with Yasova because she has trample. So, you get some extra damage in, +1/+1 counter, make her bigger. Means she can steal more stuff. Also has an ability called Ferocious. You pay 2 and a Simic, and draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Guess whose power is 4 or greater? Shaman of the Great Hunt. Guess who else's power is 4 or greater? Yasova Dragonclaw. That's 2 cards. Generally.
Wow.
At least. Minimum. For 4 mana.
Wow. 4 mana, draw 2. I would never have expected that kind of value. Oh, Shane, let me tell you something, though, about why you're a dick when you play this deck. And it's called Stealing for Good. Except it's for ill.
Oh. Joe, tell me about these things.
Well, there's a couple of cards in here that make sure that you never have to give those things back. And it's the worst. And I hate it, and I hate you for even thinking about playing them, and yet here you are, playing them. You jerk.
Joe, what kind of cards are these? Tell me one really good card in the deck that is this ability.
Well, probably the quote-unquote best way to lose friends is Deadeye Navigator. This card costs 4 generic, 2 blue, and it soul bonds to whatever you want to when it enters the battlefield. And you have the option to pay 1 and a blue mana to exile and then return something to the battlefield. Either of the soul bonded creatures. It's evasion, it's value, and it's theft, all in one for the low cost of 2 mana and losing all your friends.
Next, let's talk about removal. Some of my favorite removal cards. I feel like I just said removal cards.
You did. You're like, I love movals.
Give me all the removal cards.
Because you're not trying to remove it. You just want to move it the one time.
Yeah, I want to move it out of the way.
No!
Damn! Reality shift, baby. That's my favorite one. Exile target
Oh.
creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library, which means they put a 2/2 creature on the battlefield, which is just a face down card, and it sucks because if it's not a creature, they can't flip it over.
Oh, but wait. You could also steal that thing
I can.
and flip it over with Thassa Deep Dwelling.
I can. That's right. I was actually going to talk about Kinder's transformation because that's one of my favorite cards.
I know. It's really good.
I use these stupid enchant aura cards all the time. Anytime that I can put them in a deck, I'm putting them in the deck.
I know. I hate it. Because you're just like, you know what? You don't want to have your commander anymore, do you?
Hey, you want your commander to be a bug or a coward? Guess what? Play against me, and I'll turn it into something else.
That's really great removal tech.
Well, I mean, I probably should play like Song of the Dryad in here because that's just the more annoying one to play. But
You're a Dryad.
I can't steal that.
But you could if you tried harder,
No,
idiot.
no, because it becomes a land and not a creature.
And then you'll just Agent of Treachery that bad boy.
Oh my god. Why wouldn't I just Agent of Treachery it anyway?
But if you make it a land, then
I can't
it's
sack. I can't sack it for value if it's a land.
Yeah, why don't you have more land sacrifice?
Because we play commander and land destruction is frowned upon.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. B.
Oh, baby, ramp time.
Big ramp.
Oh, big ramp city. Oh, I'm so excited about all these things that are going to go in every single deck every time.
Joe, what's good about our ramp?
Well, pretty much nothing. It's all the stuff that you're going to see in every other deck that has green in it. It's a good job.
Well, I tried to make it a little bit different this time around because normally in green decks you don't see a lot of artifact ramp.
Oh, yeah, you're correct. But that also makes you just bad at building decks. So we've got a really solid Temur banner in here, which is just, wow, chef's kiss.
It's
really great stuff.
It's budget. Leave me alone. Joe, we try to keep these decks under or around $150. We try not to break the bank every time we make a deck. Because $150 is still a lot of money to spend on one deck.
It is a lot, but why don't we just rob banks instead?
I don't think that's legal.
You know what else is not legal? Is stealing people's stuff, and yet here this deck is doing it all the time.
You got me there. Well, speaking of stealing people's stuff, let's talk about theft effects, Joe. What kind of theft effects we got in here? Which one of these cards on the screen right now do you think is my favorite?
Your favorite is probably Dominus of Fealty or Willbreaker.
Okay, well, you're right, because both of those are my favorite. Guess what, Joe? You would have been right if you said any of the cards on the screen right now, because I love to steal.
I know you do.
I'm going to take
God,
all your
I hate
stuff. I'm going to take all your stuff, and we're going to use it for value. Joe, how are we going to use it for value? What are we going to do?
We're going to use all the sack outlets you could possibly imagine, and they're all terrible.
Okay, well,
don't play any of these cards. Actually, anytime ever, just be like, you know what? I don't want to do this. I want to give things back because I am what is called a good person. Sometimes, but the other times I'm not, which is 99% of the time. That's you, Shane. You're awful. Don't play any of these cards. What they do, though, is allow you to remove the things that you have stolen. It's like when you go over to someone's house and they have this really great TV, and you're like, I want to have that TV. Can I? And they're like, no, that's mine. And you're like, okay, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to go home. I'm going to watch one thing on it, and then I'm going to smash it over my knee. That's what these cards do. They're the smashing.
Okay, Joe, you're pretty close with that description there, but instead of smashing it over my knee, it's more like I take it to the guy that's like cracked out at the end of the street, and I just kind of give it to him, and he gives me like $5.
Yeah, you sell it for 5 cents on the 1,000. So good job on that.
Yeah.
If I were to look at one of these and say my favorite, though, out of the bunch is probably Greater Good, because you're trying to steal big stuff, so you're going to draw a bunch of cards out of it. And it's repeatable, and it draws a lot of cards, throws a lot of stuff away, but mostly it makes sure that no one else has a good time except you.
All right, well, that's how we steal things and sack things. But Joe, I bet you're asking yourself, wow, they went over a lot of cards, but there's like 10 missing that's not lands. What are those cards? Well,
That
Joe.
thought never crossed my mind because I don't care.
Oh, well, it's the miscellaneous section. So I'm showing you some miscellaneous cards right now that just kind of have utility effects. You've got Tooth and Nail as a tutor. You've got Heroic Intervention, Swiftfoot Boots as protection. And then we've got some cool cards like Hero's Blade, which says it's an equipment card, costs 2 mana, equips creature gets +3/+2, and whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach Hero's Blade to it. So, if you get this out early, before you play Yasova, you can drop Yasova on the battlefield, and this will just automatically equip to her because she's legendary. And then you buff her for free. It's great.
Shane, how on earth would I play this deck if I too drop myself to your level?
Well, Joe, I'm glad you asked that. And I'm going to go over a couple hands here on the screen. These are pretty decent hands, something you want to look out for. Deck's pretty straightforward, honestly. I mean, anybody can play this deck. It doesn't take an expert pilot to do it. So you're kind of looking for the standard, pretty decent hand. You want 3 lands, 1 piece of ramp. You probably want a sack outlet or something you could use to buff Yasova to steal some creatures, something like that. I mean, there's just a wide variety of cards, but I mean, main thing is to make sure that you have enough ramp and enough lands to play everything on curve.
Oh, okay. So are you telling me that if you got it, you'd want a Soul Ring in your opening hand?
Well, Joe, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but sometimes Soul Ring is a trap. Generally, you don't want to keep a 2-land hand with a Soul Ring unless you've got another piece of ramp. In this deck, you can kind of get away with it because most of the cards that you want to play are around 3 to 5 mana. So if you have 2 lands, Soul Ring, and another piece of ramp, you're probably good. Some key pieces to look out for are Hero's Blade. As we talked about earlier, it's a great equipment that will auto-equip the Yasova as soon as she hits the field, allowing her to steal, more creatures, which is what you want to do.
So one of the other things we're going to look out for is Willbreaker and Bloodthirsty Blade, because if those hit the battlefield, then you know that this is the person that needs to die immediately. These 2 cards in combination will allow them to take control of opponents' creatures for as long as Willbreaker's on the field. It's immediately repeatable as well, which is a real bummer. Combined with some of the other effects that allow you to keep control of creatures permanently, you can amass a huge, big old board state so quick, and I hate it, and we should all kill it immediately. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Wow. Joe, what other kind of combination of creatures do you think we could talk about? Possibly, maybe the best combination of 2 creatures on the battlefield, Deadeye Navigator and Agent of Treachery.
I mean, we could talk about it, or we could just skip over this part and leave people ignorant of the bullshit that happens here.
I'm just going to leave these 2 cards on screen. If you can't figure out what's good about these 2 cards being on the battlefield at the same time, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Shane, if there's anybody listening without actually looking at the video, you inconsiderate ass, they might want this explained to them. Deadeye Navigator allows you to immediately bounce things that it's paired with, which would be Agent of Treachery. Since it enters in Soul Bonds to Agent of Treachery, you can pay 2 mana, flicker Agent of Treachery, have it come back, and steal more crap. You can do this as long as you got 2 mana.
So, Joe, you're probably asking yourself, what kind of win condition are we going for with this deck? Well, to be honest, it's pretty Timmy-centric. The main win condition is taking our opponents out through combat damage, either through regular damage or swinging in enough with Yasova to take somebody out. I generally like to divide out the damage from the creatures I attack with, but focus Yasova on one player in particular throughout the game until they are taken out. Cards like Insurrection and Mob Rule can allow us to turn an out-of-control board state into a victory. Big strong, little weak.
Ooh.
Yasova decks generally excel at 2 things. What 2 things are those, Joe?
Well, they excel at stealing people's creatures and pissing people off greatly, to your detriment.
Well, you're right. One of her greatest strengths is one of her biggest weaknesses, especially if your playgroup does not like their toys being played with by others.
Yes, I don't like that, and I don't like you. Why are we doing this together?
Because who else are you going to do it
You're right, I don't have friends either.
with? Is it because you played this deck?
No, it's for other reasons.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm unlikable. But Shane, even though you're doing all these things that she's super good at, you should probably be mindful of the board state at all times. Pillow fort effects can really slow you down. You need to get in there and just jam on people with them creatures. But if you don't have enough mana to do that, or to take control of something that's stopping you, well, you're just SOL. And if you notice that everyone seems to be coming after your pieces, you may want to start potentially politicking with other players, provided you haven't burned every single bridge imaginable in the entire universe.
wow, Joe, that's very insightful. It's almost like you've played against this deck and you know what turns it off.
I have played against this deck 1 to 2 or 100 times, and I can tell you that I will never win against it ever, aside from the times that I have.
What you're going to hear now is probably blasphemy because you'll know that oftentimes I will not be able to actually team up with another player because everyone hates me when I play this deck. But if you're playing it for the first time, you may be able to team up with another player, making some deals with them as long as you don't sacrifice the creatures that you borrow from them so you can swing it into an opponent that might be pulling ahead.
Yes, this is referred to as domestic terrorism, and it will put you on a watch list.
If two of your opponents are running removal-heavy decks, this can shut down much of Yasova's plans. If you can't keep a creature on board, then you likely won't be dealing out much damage. This deck relies heavily on your opponents playing creatures that you're able to take control of, which gives it a low power ceiling. So if you're playing against several decks in your meta that are mostly spell decks, or combo decks that don't have creatures on the board or require creatures on the board, you're not going to be able to make much impact on the gameplay.
Yes, that's true. I've seen it happen, and it was the best time of my life.
Now, Joe, tell me why I'm an idiot for playing this deck.
Well, Shane, I will give you so many reasons why you're an idiot for playing this deck. Here's where we're going to start. You'll have fun exactly one time ever. This fun will last for exactly one game. You will never have fun in Commander ever again, and everyone will hate you, and you will always be targeted every time you play Commander. You'll lose faith in humanity, mostly yourself, just for even thinking about brewing this deck. You idiot. And on top of that, because of everything that you've done up to this point, life will be meaningless. And it'll all be your fault just for playing this deck. I can't believe you've done this. Oh my god.
Joe, this is the most accurate description of what has happened since I built this deck, because everyone hates me, and every time I even pull out the green box that has this deck in it, one, they're already mad because they always think it's Siona, which is also in the green box, and everybody hates that deck too. Joe, everybody hates every deck that I make.
There is a common thread here, and it's you. Stop making stupid decks.
All right. Well, Joe, where can they find the deck list for this deck if they want to make a stupid deck similar to this deck?
This deck can be found at the following link on Moxfield.
Moxfield is a cool new website that has deck lists, and I kind of like it. I used to use Tapped Out, but now I use Moxfield.
I agree. I prefer Moxfield to Tapped Out just because it's a lot easier to use. And it's also going to be linked in the video, and it'll be on the Mid-Power Mondays Moxfield account. Which you'll be like, oh my god, these guys were the idiots. Here's their deck. Let's never look at it.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. Joe, how much does this deck cost?
This deck costs $141.13 at time of recording, plus losing all of your friendships, faith in humanity, and general sense of ennui.
You also forgot self-respect. That's part of the cost for this deck. You have to pay all. So you're left with none afterwards.
None. Absolutely none. You'll just be like, here, have all my self-respect. It'll just be like going through a really bad breakup, except for $141, which is really a good deal if you think about it.
Well, thanks for tuning in to the first episode of Mid-Power Mondays. We hope you enjoyed at least some of this episode. We'll be bringing more Mid-Power deck techs in the future, on Mondays, I think.
Yes, look out for future Monday episodes that are going to be on Mondays for Mid-Power Mondays. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye. But bye. Later. Bye.
Bye.